The ending of the White Lotus Season 3 finale, titled A More Farty, finally reveals the source of the gunshots and the identity of the floating body first seen in Episode 1. The 90-minute episode begins with Rick leaving the mess he made with Frank in Bangkok, who surprisingly doesn't have any impact in the episode. Despite his genuine advances, Gatok seems to be losing traction with courting Mook, who wishes that Gatok was more ambitious. Jacqueline and Kate investigate Laurie's wild night with Alexei while Piper tells Lachlan straight up that she doesn't want him tagging along with her ID. She chooses to stay in Thailand. As the episode plays out, a down-and-out Timothy takes desperate measures to save face with his family, thinking that he's doing the right thing by making them all poisonous pina coladas. He doesn't make one for Lachlan, however, not because he's under the legal drinking age but because Lachlan admits that he would likely be able to live without the privilege that he was born with. With the help of Zion, who has an MBA from the University of Houston, Belinda raises her hush money price from $100,000 to a cool $5 million. In the end, it's Rick's impulsivity that sparks tragedy in the White Lotus Season 3 finale. Why Rick killed Jim at the resort and who shot Chelsea. Scott Glenn as Jim Hollinger in the White Lotus Season 3 Episode 7. Rick had an opportunity to kill Jim in the White Lotus Season 3, Episode 7 but failed to do so, seeing Jim as a frail old man and finding sympathy for him at the worst possible time. This decision turns out to have terrible consequences for Rick, who discovers from Sritala after shooting Jim dead that Jim was actually his father. Surprisingly, Rick decided to stay at the White Lotus Thai resort, knowing that Sritala and Jim could have pressed charges or even had him killed. Even though Chelsea tries to keep Rick in the light, Rick's inner demons get the best of him after Jim ruins his newfound inner peace, insulting his mother, who Jim knew much better than he had let on. Rick starts the gunfight with Jim and Sritala's bodyguards, which leaves Chelsea catching an unintentional bullet. Why Gatok killed Rick but didn't rat out Valentin. Rick, Walton Goggins, casually lounging on a sofa in the White Lotus Season 3 EP7. Image via Max. While Gatok had a fair chance of being killed in the White Lotus Season 3 finale, he ended up being the hero and getting the girl, Mook, as a result. An unlikely killer, Gatok was presented with the perfect opportunity to prove himself to Sritala and Mook when it mattered most and executed flawlessly. Gatok does his job and takes off Jim's killer, Rick, who falls into the surrounding pond with Chelsea in his arms. In the final moments of the White Lotus Season 3 finale, Valentin is shown celebrating with his friends Alexei and Vlad, who Gatok discovered were the ones who robbed the resort jewelry store. Gatok could still have ratted out Valentin to earn honor with Sritala and his co-workers but never did. Because he killed Rick, Gatok was seemingly promoted to be Sritala's personal driver, so he was already on to bigger and better things. With Mook's increased support and respect, Gatok no longer cared about exposing Valentin. Lachlan's poisoning survival twist and his vision explained. Lachlan, Sam Nivola, looking hungover in the White Lotus Season 3 Episode 6. Image via Max. Lachlan seemingly comes back from the dead after accidentally ingesting the poisonous pong-pong seed left over in the blender from his father's toxic pina coladas. Why Lachlan didn't think to clean the blender before making a protein shake is perhaps the biggest unanswered question in the White Lotus Season 3 finale. Lachlan doesn't always do things that make a lot of sense, so his negligence sort of checks out. Even though Lachlan appears to die from the poisonous drink, he miraculously regains consciousness after having a vision of his siblings and 4 monks looking at him above water. Lachlan describes this experience as seeing God. Tim's plan with the pong-pong seeds and why he backs out of it. Close-up of Timothy, Jason Isaacs, looking distressed in the White Lotus Season 3 Episode 6. Image via Max. Tim was really about to kill his entire family except Lachlan in the White Lotus Season 3 finale with those pong-pong seed-infused frozen cocktails. Tim couldn't stand to face the truth of his money laundering scheme and actually believed that Victoria, Saxon, and Piper would be better off dead than poor. Tim was clearly heavily intoxicated when he made that decision, which was also fueled by visions of killing his family earlier in the season. Still, it was a stunning move for Tim to watch his family take several sips of the poisonous cocktails before finally knocking one out of Saxon's hands, relaxing he couldn't go through with it. Why Piper decided not to stay in Thailand. Piper, Sarah Catherine Hook, crying in the White Lotus Season 3 Episode 6. Image via Max. Piper hilariously decides that she won't be able to handle a year studying Buddhism in Thailand because of the food. She confesses to her parents that the food she ate at the Buddhist monastery was bland and unsatisfying, which made her seriously reconsider her entire intention of living in Thailand for a year. Up until the White Lotus Season 3 finale, it seemed like Piper was the true black sheep of the dysfunctional Ratliff family. This change of heart, and more so the reasoning behind it, proves that the pong-pong fruit doesn't fall far from the tree and that Piper is exactly as sheltered and immature as her siblings are. How Laurie's confession at dinner made her closer to Jacqueline and Kate. Carrie Coon as Laurie wearing a robe and looking over a balcony in The White Lotus Season 3 Episode 8. Laurie, Kate, and Jacqueline's collective storyline takes a backseat in The White Lotus Season 3 finale, but they are some of the few characters who end up with happy endings. Laurie, who has had a rough couple of years leading up to her vacation in Thailand, continues to be real with Kate and Jacqueline about how she's feeling and what this vacation actually meant to her. Jacqueline says she has been incredibly happy during their vacation, which seems hard to believe completely and somewhat disingenuous. Laurie counters this by telling her old friends that she's been sad, primarily because being around the beautiful and wealthy Kate and Jacqueline forces her to confront her mistakes and regrets in life. Ultimately, this honesty brings the Victory Tour trio closer than ever without having to rely on their usual fake and catty behavior. Greg and Belinda's deal explained and why she goes back on her plan with Pawn Chai. Greg Agari, John Grise, invites Belinda to a party at his mansion in The White Lotus Season 3 Episode 6. Image via Max. Greg does not end up trying to kill Belinda or Zion and instead accepts Zion's ridiculous counteroffer to keep quiet about all that Tanya stuff in Italy. After initially offering Belinda $100,000, Zion counters with $5 million without blinking after doing his homework on Tanya's wealth. Zion calculated that $5 million would amount to just 1% of Greg's net worth, which turned out to be accurate. It was a big risk that had a big reward for Belinda and Zion, who left the White Lotus Thai resort as millionaires. Interestingly, however, Belinda exits without telling Pawn Chai the good news, leaving him behind holding his dreams in his hands, similar to what Tanya did to Belinda in Season 1.